Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Well, morning still. Appreciate the time. Appreciate the attention, and most of all, thank you so much for the conversations. This has been a real blast. And I know that for many of you who have swung by the booth, we've talked about software. For those of you who know Kite, we talk about AI. We're a company that develops AI tools to help make sales teams more productive. But today, we're not going to be talking about technology, so don't worry about it. We're not going to be going through a lot of math. What we're going to be going through is some of the lessons that we've learned from the clients that we work with and the companies that we work with. Because when we think about sales playbooks, and I know we've heard some fantastic tips and tricks so far, one of the unfortunate realities is that for a lot of teams, for a lot of sales reps, their playbooks suck. And that's unfortunate. And I know that nobody in the room is making these mistakes. But we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we've seen and some of the ways that we've seen customers overcome them. So first off, when we talk about this idea of a sales playbook that's really successful, what does that mean? And when we talk to clients, when we hear them, we hear all sorts of comments. We hear about playbooks that help people stay on message. We hear about playbooks that help people run a process. We hear about playbooks that help introduce the right product, the right customer. But fundamentally, we want to help rep productivity. And we had the great fortune of running a study last year. We had over 2,000 reps respond, and we took a look at sales productivity, both how did companies do their attainment, what were the results, what were the technologies they used, how did they spend their time, and we found a few really interesting things. First off, almost 3/4 of the respondents said that increasing selling time was a key priority. Now, the irony, though, is although it was a key priority for everybody, only 2 in 5 of them actually had an explicit mandate at their company to improve selling time. So there's an interesting dichotomy there that I'm sure none of us face on a day-to-day basis. Because I know we tell our reps, hey, let's hit attainment, let's hit numbers, let's get messaging out. But how do we focus on time and what's the results? And that's actually the single biggest difference. When we took a look at the companies that did have an explicit mandate to improve the amount of selling time, the results were 36% higher for those companies over the ones that did not have an explicit mandate. So the one fundamental takeaway, if we can all agree that selling time is a top priority, let's actually make it a top priority. Now, if we look at those companies that actually prioritized, had mandates for selling time, and we looked at the comments that they heard about their sales playbooks, about their sales systems, this is a great comment, and this is from one of the reps. And I'm sure we would all love to hear this kind of a testimonial from one of our own reps. And what was great is that this rep posted the comment on LinkedIn about their company's playbook. And wouldn't this just be great? I mean, I love our new playbook. It makes me more effective, more confident. This is great. This is the ideal. But this isn't what we see with every company out there. And when we go into a company and we say, hey, what's working, what's not, very often we hear comments more like this. We have great products and great people, but we don't quite know what we're doing wrong. And when we take a look at their material, and we take a look at their collateral, and we take a look at their playbooks, unfortunately, it looks a little bit more like this. It's organized, it's succinct, it's up to date-ish. And the reality is that this isn't a technology issue. This isn't is it a paper book or is it a digital book? Is it driven by Salesforce or is it driven by an engagement platform? It's really a little bit more about the philosophy behind a playbook. And that's why we're not talking about technology too much today. We're going to talk more about the approach. Because at the end of the day, when you think about a great playbook, your reps really need something more like this. We let reps, we use these metaphors. We say, hey, quarterback the deal. Go and run this. What's the play? And when you have a quarterback, when Tom Brady's on the field in his clinch time, and he's looking at his playbook, that playbook sure as hell doesn't say, here's how you throw the football, here's the script for how the game is going to go, here's how you win. It's in that moment, what exactly do you need to do? And this is how we need to equip our reps so that in the moment, they could do the right thing. So I'm going to go through 5 tips. I'm really fortunate to have Corey and Hillman joining me to focus in on a couple of these. But let me get things warmed up, and we'll start off with the first one. First one is design for search. And again, this is regardless of whether or not you're shipping physical products, if you're shipping a digital product, if you're tossing it on your intranet. But think about search. And the reason why this is important, when we go back to that study that we did, the average rep was spending almost 4 hours a week searching through internal documentation. And I know there's a ton of research out there, not just our own, that validates these numbers. And that activity of searching is a huge time sink. And when we think about designing for search, the best team to learn from is your marketing team, your content team. And when you think about designing for search, they're collateral. They do exactly that. The first thing, think SEO. Buy the questions, not the answers. If you're selling a product online and you're buying ads, you're investing in the SEO, you think about the phrases people use, not how you talk about your product. So if your team, for example, says, we have a FinServe client, make sure you think about content, structure your content in the form of FinServe, not financial services, because that's our mandated description. Think about user tagging and organizing. Every rep that you pull in, every new grad that you pull in, every experienced rep that you pull in will have a different frame of reference, and the way they contribute and organize content is very meaningful and telling. Very often when we create playbooks, we think very much about a curriculum, a mandated structure, and then we create and organize a library with the goal of making it easier, but it's not often in the language of the end users. And then finally, if you are using technology, if you're using a unified search, if you're using a tool like a Kite, like a Sales Hood, like anything to manage that content, keep in mind that your documents, your files, will often be easier for those tools to parse. There's amazing technology out there that uses natural language processing to analyze your documents. There's a ton of vendors out there, but all of them will deal with this. The fact that documents, be it PDFs, Word, web pages, are more parsable than spreadsheets. And if we think about helping technology help us, that's one of the tidbits. And I know we often tend to put things into spreadsheets and tables because it lets us pull that information together, but it also means that the technology can't always help us out as much. So these are some of the things that we're seeing. And clearly, I come to it from the perspective of a vendor, from a technologist, experience building great software and leading teams, but I only get to see the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to invite a couple of colleagues up to come and help us talk through a couple of more tips based on their even more extensive experience. So Hillman, Corey, maybe you guys can come up.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay, so before we kind of get you guys to introduce yourselves, sometimes visual aids are more helpful. So as we think about helping out a quarterback to help us out, I've got a playbook here for you, Corey.
All right.
And as we think about the balance and the dichotomy, Hillman, we've got a fantastic playbook for you so that we can remember the balance that we got to work with.
Is it that obvious who was the quarterback and who was on the debate team? There we go. All right.
So, playbooks. You guys have built over 100 playbooks for organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys got started, the organizations you work with? Why is your expertise really helpful here today?
Yeah, well, we work with companies that are concerned that they're not going to be able to hit their revenue goals. They're struggling to close the gap between the top performers and everybody else. And then they're anxious that those top performers aren't going to stick around much longer. And so the idea is being able to take the tactics and skills and frameworks that work for those top performers and deliver them just in time when everybody else can use them to have impact on revenue and profitability.
Fantastic. And what kind of companies do you guys usually work with?
Go ahead.
Fast-growing companies, people that are really chasing targets that might seem big and challenging to hit, but if you do things right and you have this whole team speaking a common language and running out of something that doesn't look like this, then you can get there.
Okay.
Scaling, growing organizations, revenue goals, competitive marketplaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about tips and tricks for playbooks, I know that we bounced ideas around process, how you organize it, but the first tip that you guys gave me was the idea of really knowing your winning zone.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about why that's really relevant to a playbook process?
Yeah, well, there's places where your team's going to win. There's places where your team's going to battle with the competition. There's places where you're going to lose. And actually, can you guys, we don't have a slide for this. Can you guys just make a diagram?
Venn diagram?
Yeah, can you make a diagram for me? Can each of you loop your arms like this?
We can do this.
And then Venn diagram it?
How's that?
Okay.
There you go.
So here's the concept. If we look at all this space around Hillman and Joseph, these are all the things that the prospect's worried about. They're all their jobs, all the different things that are on their to-do list. And then when we think about the problem that they're trying to solve that you might be able to help with, you've got this winning zone right here where we're going to win. And you've got this little area, this little slice here where we're going to battle, and you've got this slice here where you're going to lose. And when we look at how salespeople talk to prospects, they've got an option around what they're going to say. If we've got a 30-minute discovery call and we want to talk 70% of the time, you don't have that many minutes to talk. We know salespeople are supposed to ask questions. What we see a lot of times is they just ask questions for the sake of asking questions. So look at me, boss. I ask questions. I'm good. But did they ask questions in this winning zone? And that's the thing that when we use products, Gong and Chorus are out there with the call recording analytics software, when we look at that, did the salesperson take the care and effort to ask the questions within that winning zone? Or were they asking questions that were outside where they might actually lead to a losing situation?
So in the book that you guys just wrote, you speak a lot about those discovery questions and finding them in the winning zone. When people are putting together that playbook, how do they go about identifying the right questions to include in it?
There's a process, a framework that you use from going from the world of features and benefits, which is where marketing likes to spend a lot of their conversations and trying to plant seeds and instigate conversations, versus what you're doing as a salesperson, which is trying to uncover pain and trying to find opportunities to have conversations again in that winning zone. So there's a framework, there's actually a framework in the book that helps you to move from these conversations that are very pitch-oriented into a diagnostic approach that allows you to have conversations in that pain zone around jobs to be done and the challenges facing those folks that you're working with. Again, in that winning zone as exemplified by other folks that you've worked with in the past.
Okay, so we talk about questions that you're using kind of in the moment, on the go. That's a great segue into the second point that you guys gave us, the idea of writing and preparing your playbook for real-time use.
Yeah.
To kind of set that stage, I want to pull a comment out of the other book that you guys wrote, the Sales Enablement Playbook. And so kind of pulling up here, you spoke a little bit about micro-content. So maybe you can help us understand, in the context of a playbook, why is micro-content the right way to think about it?
Yeah, the biggest challenge for salespeople is that we are having live conversations. We do have the opportunity to prepare for those conversations. We have training that allows for us to establish some skills around conversations. But in the moment, we need to make split-second decisions, identify what's happening in a conversation, and to be able to reflect our prospect or our buyer in such a way as to move that conversation forward or to quickly disqualify. As someone who was previously a marketing executive and I've been a sales executive, marketing creates beautiful, massive amounts of content that are deep dives into product. We love you though, marketing. Deep dives into case studies. And it greases the skids for our conversations, but I cannot go through a 30-page white paper in a conversation in 6 minutes with a prospect on the phone. I need to be able to distill that into the things that are relevant to that job to be done, to that persona, to that specific vertical or industry, and to be able to articulate that in a competent way that's going to establish a trusted advisor relationship. So playbooks cannot be reference material. You used the term library earlier. There's a lot of activity happening in a library. None of it is sales-oriented, right? It's a lot around trying to fuel your knowledge base. And we've seen sales playbooks in organizations that we've gone into that began with things like the first 90 slides around onboarding. Well, that's great on day 12. Not so great on day 120, certainly not great in your 12th month there, right? We've seen things like deep product knowledge. Well, that's great, but that's not playbook-oriented material. That's something that you should be imbuing your sales team with product or service knowledge in another type of a venue. We've seen things like expense reports inside of the playbook.
You got to know how to do your expense report.
Got to know how to do your expense report, but it's not a play, right? So the idea is to, instead of creating static reference, to create dynamic resource. So when you think reference, you think back to high school, those giant reference books that were dictionaries or encyclopedia back in the day. All this stuff is online now, right? But that's reference, and it's important. It's not a playbook. A playbook is action. A playbook is Mr. Tom Brady over here, who's in the middle of a game trying to figure out what to do next to most effectively, again, create velocity in a conversation to either move towards a winning advantage or to disqualify quickly.
Okay, so these are great, and I agree 100%. To make it very real, I picked up an example. So before the talk today, I was searching online. I looked for persona templates to see what I could get. And I found a great one. Fantastic, gorgeous, includes a ton of work.
Beautiful marketing.
How is this different from what's ideally in a playbook?
You want to take this?
What are you going to do with it 4 minutes before a phone call with the prospect? That's my question.
So, send it to the prospect.
Yeah. So is this you, Joseph? Can you confirm this before we hop on? Because if it's not, we just DQ you right out of the gate.
So I pulled out an example that you'd worked with a client, took out the personalized information, remixed it a little bit. How does this help as a persona in a playbook context?
Because it's scannable, it's actionable, it's something that you can reference. If it's 5 minutes before a meeting, if it's 10 minutes before a meeting, I say, okay, that first question, that third question, I like it. The second one, not so much for this one. And so as a salesperson going through pre-meeting prep, which you might not even be able to do right before the meeting because you're back to back all day, you might do it the night before, the morning of. If salespeople aren't doing pre-meeting prep, then they're one of the few professionals in the world that isn't preparing for the critical event related to their job. And so first, they need to do it. Second of all, scannable and actionable is the only way that they're going to be able to do it effectively.
Can I add a piece there?
Absolutely.
So the playbook being action-oriented and dynamic means that it has to be a live ecosystem. This is something that's living. It's not something that's published and it's brought down from the mountains and you set it there and this is the edict by which you live. We've gone into organizations that have spent 3 to 6 months developing a playbook that once it was rolled out was moot, right? It's obsolete. That's not the goal. The goal is to be able to surface information from the ground level, from the top level, and to have that plentifully populate your organization in such a way where all of your intelligence is accessible by everyone inside of the organization. So another reason why a card like this works versus the screen before is I don't have time to make a beautiful, the thing is beautiful, go back to it for really quickly. This thing is gorgeous, but when I look at this, if I've just gotten off the phone with someone who, what is this persona? Is a planning director, and I've heard a nugget of information that is the reason why she decided to accept a demo or a next conversation, or even the reason she said no. I don't have the time or energy to create something like this as a resource to share with the rest of my team. If you go to the next slide, this I can do. This I can do. I can drop a couple bullets into something, share it with my team, get validation from the rest of my team, and then have that again shared with the entire organization.
That's fantastic. So, fantastic comments. Got one kind of trick question for you. We know that searchability is important. We know that having it referenceable in the moment is important. But we also know that people learn with different ways. Sometimes sitting in front of an audience is the best way. Sometimes having a tool is the best way. Sometimes having a physical reference is the best way. So how do you reconcile those together when you are delivering a playbook to a customer?
I think the question goes to how do you prep for meetings? Some people need to prep for meetings the day before. Some Hillman can do it 1 minute before. And we all have different skills around that. So I don't think it's so much about what's your learning style related to creation of the content, but it's can we create it so it can be consumed by people given their style for preparing for meetings.
Let me give you an example. Yeah, that's exactly key, is being able to adjust everything to your ideal method of learning and your ideal method of retrieval. Some people take notes and then never reference them again because they've locked it in from taking notes. Some people take notes specifically, I've seen this in multiple colors, because that's going to allow them to come back to pink means that this is something to use actionably, yellow means something I'm going to reference later from a training perspective, green is something never to say, probably wouldn't want to use green for that. But anyway, with my daughter, we were getting ready to make some pancakes and we're doing this cooking thing, and I like to read. She doesn't like to read anything. She wants to get on YouTube, find a video. So if you create multiple means of media, if you have a means of not just having people flip through a book that's a static chronological piece of content, but allows them to adjust and to add their own elements to a playbook, then you'll create success. And this is how you get integration, and this is how you level up the entire organization.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So the playbooks I've given you are yours to keep. They're fantastic. No problem.
Thank you.
But thank you so
Losing
much for
zone
doing
and
it.
a playbook. Thanks.
When we get to questions, I'm going to pull you guys back up because I'm sure there's going to be more.
Take this with us.
Yes. Everybody, if you guys
Thanks.
can thank Corey and Hillman, appreciate it. And, what they're not going to say is they just published their 4th book. It's a workbook for building sales playbooks. We're giving it away at our booth. So if you want to swing by, there's a copy for you. They also recently mentioned that they're going to be giving it away for free online. So you'll see a chapter, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a chapter a week for free on LinkedIn. So you can also just follow them and get the content electronically if you'd like. So we've got 3 great tips so far. Number 4, this is also one that we got very, very clearly from our customers as they learned and rolled out playbooks. And a lot of organizations make the mistake of saying there can only be one, but the reality is actually the opposite. What we often see in an organization when they're first rolling out a playbook, they're caught up in all of the standardization that they're trying to do. You know, they'll say, hey, this is the process that we're going to do, or we're going to try and standardize on a methodology, or we're going to standardize on a structure in our CRM. And then they believe that the de facto standard is that the playbook itself should also be standardized. The challenge, though, is just like Corey and Hillman shared, everybody learns differently. Everybody needs different tools, not just at the individual level, but also at the team level. So I included a couple of examples here. This is from one of our customers, not pitching any specific technology, but if you look at the headings in particular, you'll see how they've got an AE mid-market playbook, a BDR playbook, a customer success manager playbook. And if you look in the individual cards and sections, you'll see repetition and content reuse. And the key nugget, the key takeaway there is when you can sit down with a team and say, I know you deal with a different part of the market, or I know you're dealing with a different product. These are the tools and tricks that you need. And then go further and let those reps remix and personalize. You'll have an even more powerful playbook. And that word personalization is a really scary one because very often we'll hear reps that say, oh, I know that those are the discovery questions or those are the comments, but they don't sound like me. So I'm going to put it into my words. We're not trying to suggest that people should personalize these things that you've defined that are standard and that should be delivered a specific way because you know which questions work, which messaging work. But in that white space, they should be able to personalize and experiment, bring those lessons back to you and fold them in. And they should be able to remix because you'll have reps, for example, who say, these are great customer stories, but those 3 customers are mine. I know those stories. I don't need them in my playbook. I need different customer stories. Or maybe you have a rep that came from a competitor, so they know the industry really well. They don't need that background, but they could really use the customer stories because they don't know your customers. So allowing for that personalization at a team and at an individual and enabling your team to actually do that is a critical element. Number 5. To be on the lookout for those hidden plays. This is another exciting, fun one because we work with teams all the time who say, we've got a new process, we've got a new tool, and I'm sure you guys have all been in this situation where we're rolling out a new methodology or a new system, and it's all about sharing with the team what the right approach is, and then you go to the sales managers to ask what's working for them, and you share them with the group, but it's still funneled through your enablement and your ops team. Having enough sensors, enough monitors, enough ways to pick up tips, and literally being on the lookout for those hidden plays is the best way to help share knowledge. This is a quote that came from another customer. It's like, our best reps all have their own resources. They keep them in Google Docs, they've got their bookmarks, they've got their tips, they've got their language, and that's what we want new reps to get, not just more lectures of people up on stage. And so being on the lookout for the expertise your best reps already have is really important. And there's a couple of ways you can suss that out. You don't just have to go out and say, hey, what's your expertise? Give it to me. You can be much more specific. So we've got a couple here. Ask them for their bookmarks. What do they bookmark in their browser? Do they have something in Google Docs or maybe a Word document where they've kept their notes, their tips, their resources? Ask them what browser extensions. Good example. We had this new rep. She was just killing it. And when I took a look at her browser tab, she had about 50 billion extensions sitting in there. And I had her walk through. She actually had 3 for email discovery. I mean, we generate lists. We use tools like Discover.org, but she had 3 more extensions because if that one bounces, she used this extension, but she only gets free credits, 50 credits a month. And so when she runs out of those, she uses this extension. And then there's this other one she uses that she only gets 5, but it's usually really, really good. So uses those in her clincher situations. But just that expertise of knowing which tools is invaluable. Browser extensions really easy. Similarly, what apps they're using on their phone. And then as you think about content, access to networks, LinkedIn groups, videos they're following, I'm very specific about those ones because the more specific you are with the ask, the easier it is to get them. And more importantly, when you identify them and then fold those specific tidbits into the playbook, that's you appreciating your team, giving them that recognition and putting them on a podium, and that's the best way to maintain alignment and trust with the team. So all of these fantastic ways to make your playbook very, very helpful right now. But as an AI company, as a technology company, we often get asked what's happening in the future. Where's the direction going? So where are we headed, especially as we think about playbooks? And it would be really, really easy to spend a ton of time talking about natural language processing, recommendation systems, autonomous agents. But I'd like to anchor it back to what are we experiencing as professionals as we try to enable our own sales teams. And you see this on a day-to-day basis. We see this with our meetups with the Sales Enablement Society and at other conferences. That migration to more of a RevOps and a revenue approach is going to fundamentally change the way we design and roll out playbooks. So as we think about the idea of one revenue team to bring together your sales, your marketing, your customer success teams, many of you have already completed that journey, you're going on that journey, or are about to embark on it. This has some very interesting ramifications to your playbooks, especially when you think about the tips that we are sharing. You're going to have more teams contributing to your playbooks. So that idea of user-generated content and collecting it easier will be important. You'll have more teams leveraging them. So that ability to personalize will be even more important, because your customer success team sure as heck needs a different playbook than your sales and your field marketing team. So all of these things are going to be key to keep in mind. So pulling that together, I said there's going to be 5 key tips, and here they are again. Make sure you're designing for search, knowing your winning zone, and yes, for the record, that was me, not Hillman's. Make sure you write for real-time use. There's got to be more than one, and then always be on the lookout for those hidden personal plays. But if you're going to leave this room, you're going to go, these conferences are fantastic because you pick up tons of ideas, lessons, and then you get back and you've got that flood of email, and we're all caught up in catching up. So if you're going to take a look at what can you do right now, as soon as you get back, I've got 3 questions you can ask your reps just to get that ball started. You can ask them specifically, what have you bookmarked? What are your favorite extensions? And what are the best resources you found last month? Time box it. Be very specific. If you took those 3 questions, sent them out to your team, and then even just compiled the answers, you'll be well on your way to accomplishing all 5 of those tips. So I know we've covered a bunch. We've talked about a number of customers. We had Corey and Helen. If you guys can come back up, we've got a few more minutes for questions. But I'd love to open it up for the group. We've got the box here, and Corey's got the wristband, so he's going to be the best one to make sure we throw this.
I took it off.
Oh, totally, Corey.
All right, all right.
So any questions we've got from the group?
No questions.
That's the easiest presentation. We've answered everything.
That's amazing. What was that? Tumbleweeds.
We've answered absolutely everything.
There it is.
Thanks so much. I'd like to remind everybody that the book that they've just finished publishing is available at our booth, and happy to give those away. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.